Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard here with Bill Stierle, and I'm really excited to talk about something that we touched on briefly in our last episode, and it really deserves its own episode, which is why we're talking about it today, and that is really clarifying these 3 P's of purchasing truth, and that is perception, perspective, and proportion. So, Bill, can you help take us on this journey today?
Yeah, well, Tom, thanks a lot for setting this up and making these podcasts work. I think the really delightful part of engaging these 3 words, perception, perspective, and proportion, is watch how messaging comes in and hits our brain. A lot of times the person is just saying a narrative just to claim space from one of those 3 positions. They're not actually interested in winning the battle. They're not interested in speaking what the truth is. What they're interested in doing is occupying the space to reinforce a belief or a person that this is the best way to go. So somebody that puts a talking point into the media is not interested in activating or advocating for truth. What they're doing is trying to cloud the environment with a partial truth so it starts accumulating or occupying space. And when it does that, it really affects everybody else's discussion because now you're fighting for space in someone else's brain.
Is that sort of where the cliche sucking all the oxygen out of the room might have come from that kind of experience?
Boy, I really appreciate that phrase. I didn't think about that before because, yeah, when the experience of sucking the energy out of the room is, I'm going to occupy all the energy based on these words and phrases, and and then really purchase truth because my messaging is stronger. My experience is more is presumed to be more valuable because of the stature of the person I am, because I happen to be on TV. It's being on TV gives a great amount of credibility to somebody because somebody approved for that person to be on TV. The only problem is the gatekeeper might not be a really good gatekeeper. It might not be a gatekeeper for truth. It's a gatekeeper how to get revenue. It's how can I score points in order to get dollars, to get viewers. That's the new gatekeeper. The new gatekeeper isn't the gatekeeper of truth.
I really believe that, Bill. I agree with you, and I think that really the current government administration resembles that because the president rode his sort of celebrity all the way to the White House, and that his position on television gave him a status in America.
Right.
That's I think you and I mentioned in a past episode that celebrities are America's royalty, and royalty I think can be regarded as, right or wrong, as leaders or people of importance, right?
Yeah, because somebody gave them approval to be the Spider-Man. I mean, it doesn't mean they have a great deal of wisdom, knowledge, and experience. It just means that they have exposure. And exposure can eclipse wisdom, knowledge, and experience. It just can.
And
It just does.
and
So,
that would seem to be way out of proportion with, you know,
right.
I guess, well, I was almost going to say truth, but I don't think that's a proper choice of words, is it?
Well, it is a truth. Excuse me. It is true, but not the truth. A big challenge has to do with this perception, which has to do with a person's beliefs, their experiences, and then what they can see. Those are kind of three tenets of perception. And there's, a couple other ways to think about perception is what am I seeing? And then this is my experience. And this is my belief, which is a coded message that I've been reinforcing for a long time. And that's what a belief doesn't have to be true. It just has to be something I've been reinforcing. Beliefs are important for us, and I can have an episode on this, but what they're doing is they're creating certainty in the world. They don't have to be true, but they have a certainty to it. Okay, so that's what a belief does. Perspective is a little wider. It has to do with opinion, a little wider. It's my education and my knowledge influences how wide I'm thinking about it. Whereas if my perception expands, then I have to consider that the world isn't as black as white as I would like it to be, or in perspective and certainty, as I'm moving my hands in and out here, perspective is wider, certainty is more narrow. I have some certainty about the safety in my neighborhood. But if I go onto my neighborhood watch and look at all the different activities that are happening in my neighborhood, that could actually be scary. So I'd rather not look. So my perspective and my perception says right where it is that my neighborhood is safe. It doesn't have any malicious activity happening in it. Meanwhile, 3 blocks down, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely true. It's like that. I forget what the website is, but this is one where you can look up anybody that has to be registered because of the sex offender registry, and that will give you certainty as to who's in your neighborhood. But I think a lot of people really don't want that perspective. It's
Yeah,
pretty scary.
it is. It is.
Might say
I'd rather,
scary honesty.
I'd rather hold the perception that my neighborhood is safe, that the value of my house is X. But the perspective is this is what is happening in my neighborhood that's influencing the value of my house. This is influencing my neighborhood, why people move here and why people don't. Now, proportion is what news media can play with. Proportion. How big do I want to make this thing that took place, and how small would I like to make this big thing look from a proportion standpoint? So if we take a slogan, that person made a mountain out of a molehill. A molehill's this big, a mountain is huge. So they're messing with proportion. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So now you could see in media just recently, this thing started out as a mountain, but it was really a mouse. The metaphor is not particularly clean, but it is unique and it is new. And all of a sudden, it's a very simple image that a person that believes that this person is, because they're in charge and because they have money, they must know more than I do. That's not what is actually happening. What's happening is the person is occupying space to reinforce a belief. It's a reinforcing message because I already placed my bet on this horse. I'm not moving my bet because that was my perception based on the things I heard at the beginning and the things I think about this person. I have a lot of an investment on this person being successful. What? You're telling me that he's not successful? How does that equate? I've been spending years watching him fire people.
Is that such, I'm going to restate that. This brings up a serious question in my mind, Bill, and I wonder if it does with a lot of our listeners too. And that is it that hard for people on the whole to change their beliefs, to take in new information and change their position? I mean, if he was their guy, they voted for him, they want to feel like they voted for the right guy. Maybe there's some disillusionment. Their perspective changes.
Right.
They see that what they thought was true really isn't true. Oh, he's this very successful businessman. He's made lots of money, so he'd be great to run the country. And then you learn, well, he really didn't make all that much money. He lost over $1 billion in 10 years and paid no taxes to our government. When does he's my guy give way to, wow, I was really deceived, or I see things differently now?
Whether it's Jim Jones, who is a cult leader, or, the famous, Manson, Charles Manson, those believers still struggle with how they invested in this person that turned out to be so dark and evil. They still struggle with it. You can ask them. You do an interview. It's a little struggle because what they did was invest in truth.
Wow.
They invested in that. This person is speaking with conviction. So if I'm going to, let me show a slide here, Tom. I think if I could share my screen. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let me show a slide of this because it is a famous, it's a diagram that can be really, really helpful to look at how truth gets purchased and hijacked. See, the way the light is shining, the way the direction the person is looking is seeing a true thing. So it's true that someone can have a Jewish, a Christian, a Muslim belief, and they're looking at the world this way, and another religion is looking at it this way, and both of them have a truth to it, even though they're getting it to it in a different way. So the only challenge is that one of those, when those beliefs are written in a black and white, or I'm the person that is to enforce this belief, that's when the trouble gets started, is because my truth is correct and I'm going to fight or enforce it. So this is why religions sit in the space they do, and government is looking to be separate from that. I don't want that stuff in this stuff, because this stuff is a standard that we're all following. This stuff is a standard that you can choose to follow because it's your belief truth. A belief, it's true. It's a true belief for you. It's not the truth. Because if you start doing, the truth is, well, it's written in this book, therefore eye for an eye, or stone people is okay for a group of people to do. Gosh, that is not the greater truth. That is a truth in that book, but is not the greater truth. The greater truth is, here's the way we are choosing to talk through, litigate through a law. That's what the truth is. So so what happens then is, when a person says it's true that there was a mountain that they made into a mouse that was really a mouse, the person that's been seeing that direction is still seeing the square, where if you're reading the document, you're seeing the circle. You're going like, I don't think that's really true. I don't think that's really true.
Yeah. Wow. I just want to paint a mental
The
picture
truth.
here for our podcast listeners who
Please.
aren't able to see this right now. And, if you're listening to the podcast, I highly recommend, when you have a chance, when you're done driving to work or you're done at the gym and you can, get to a computer, go to the blog post for this episode. And you need to see this slide, or go check out the video on the
Yes.
YouTube channel, because this really illustrates it so well. What this slide shows, just so you get an idea, is there is a cylinder sort of floating in 3D space. It's cylindrical around its axis, and it's flat on each side. And if you look at it from the side of the cylinder and you have light projected and it creates a shadow on the wall, it looks like a square in one
Yes.
direction. And then if you shine light from the end of the cylinder that's round and it's projecting onto the adjacent wall, a shadow of a circle. So I mean, it's a rather sort of simple visual. It actually kind of reminds me, I think there's a movie production company that does a similar thing with their logo. It's called, I think it's like CE. It blends
Right.
the letter C and E together, and they shine a light differently, and from one perspective you see the C and the other you see the E. It's very much like that. I don't remember
That's right.
the name
That's
of
right. I got to remember that. That's right. That's right.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't
The
remember the name of the
perception.
production company. But anyway, this really helps you understand visually, and maybe all of you listening are understanding conceptually, which is great. But it really is a fantastic visual representation of how perspective alters your truth, or what is true to you.
Right.
And and that's illuminating to me. And at the same time, it's a little frustrating to me,
Yeah.
because even having worked with you for a few years, Bill, I thought there is actually a truth. Much like you hear the news media commentators on the evening news, who are doing like fact checking, and
Yes.
that's how they try to combat
Yes.
these perceptions and beliefs, which maybe is not the best way to do it. But they I remember recently Chuck Todd on Meet the Press interviewing Rudy Giuliani, and at some point in this, Rudy Giuliani is saying one thing that's his truth, or that he believes. Chuck Todd's saying another, and at one point Rudy says, truth isn't truth. And Chuck Todd sort of threw his hands up in the air, starts laughing, and says, are you kidding me? Truth isn't truth? This is going to become a meme, he said. And
That's right.
it may still become a meme, but
Yes.
I, at the time, thought Rudy Giuliani was way off base, that truth isn't truth. But
That's right. Yep.
now you're giving me a different perspective.
Yes.
That maybe the truth isn't truth is a little not how I would say it, but certainly that there are different truths for the same thing.
Right. Right. And if one person is talking about the square version of the truth, and the other person is talking about the circle version of the truth, they're actually not looking at what is true, or they're the full truth. The full truth is, there's a cylinder there. Notice, even I'm bringing it to your attention, and you're going like, I was looking at the reflection the whole time. Tom, people keep looking at the reflection and arguing about the reflection. They're not arguing about the primary issue.
Wow. That was mind blowing right there again, Bill.
The primary issue is there's a cylinder in the middle. And the cylinder in the middle is actually saying healthcare, the amount of money we're paying for healthcare is not at the value that we are getting. We're not getting the value out of the money we're paying. That's the cylinder. Let's talk about the cylinder. Don't talk about whether Obamacare or a private insurance issue is the way to go. The value is problematic. There's people that are getting paid money for low valued service and delivery.
Wow. So many things running through my mind right now, Bill. This is
I know it's
fantastic.
a fantastic and annoying both at the same time. My emotions are going to go up instantly: irritated, aggravated, annoyed, frustrated, angry, if you want to choose to do that, if you want to judge it. But really the truth is, look at the darn cylinder. The cylinder is sitting there. The cylinder is the tax system does not meet the need for fairness across the board. In fact, the cylinder is this is what fairness would look like if a secretary is paying 35% and a con man, or that's the judgmental word, but a person that is paying zero in taxes because they're a millionaire or a billionaire, that's problematic. Now, I'm not saying that the proportionality, now we're back to the word proportion, is that there can't be something that's closer to talking about what the cylinder what we need to do with the cylinder. Because if I'm flying into an airport in the United States and I'm flying into the airport in Asia, I can see that they place more value in infrastructure than we do because of how beautiful their airport is. And I could just pick an airport in Asia that looks gorgeous and beautiful. In comparison to our airports, really? We're not getting the value out of it. Some people are getting extraordinary value because they're sitting at the top while everybody else is slugging it out at the bottom. Now, I'm not saying other countries don't have a whole other set of problems about human rights and belief structures that they get stuck in. And, I'm not saying change systems. I'm saying talk about the cylinder. That's the cylinder there.
So that, to me, this is even further illuminating. This is fantastic. So the one thing you said a while back is the whole truth. Is that really the distinction here? That a lot of people purchase truth through a number of different techniques that we have talked about in past episodes, and we're going to continue to talk about in new episodes, but they talk about a partial truth.
Right.
And that maybe it's a certain perspective gives that partial truth. Maybe it's a proportional difference that's a partial truth. But
Right.
Is there always, and I hope this is true, Bill, but is there always a whole truth that if you really do look at it from all perspectives, if you illuminate the cylinder, if you actually talk about the cylinder and not the projection on the wall, the shadow or the reflection, is there a whole truth, or is it still always shades of gray?
The bad news is there's not a whole truth, because we are learning, growing, and changing and developing and researching, and the truth is changing. In the past episode, I talked about oil. Well, in the 1970s, the oil reserves were running out. The experts said the oil reserves are running out. Therefore, Jimmy Carter says, okay, we need to slow down our gas mileage. So we're going to change our speed limit from 60 miles an hour to 55 miles an hour. because the experts are telling us that this is the only amount of oil that's left. Meanwhile, within literally, 5 or 10 years of that, the oil company figured out how to drill deeper. They figured out how to do horizontal drilling. Oh, well, the experts said, well, we didn't know you were going to do that. Now we have this many years. So now all of a sudden the truth changed, the cylinder changed. But you've got to remember to keep talking about the cylinder. Don't talk about the projection. Don't talk about the square as much. Don't talk about the circle. And if you talk about the circle or talk about the square, you've got to come back to what the cylinder is. What's the value? How can we get closer to the cylinder? What's the closest cylinder that we have? Can we do a little more research? Have we done enough research to make a decision that's going to last us for 5 or 10 years until we want to revisit this? This is the best we've got. So if I'm looking at Medi-Cal and Medicare as the cylinder issue, I would say, okay, this is where the numbers are right now regarding its viability as an insurance program. There's no handout. There's no entitlement. I'm looking at this cylinder. Handout is a person projecting judgment, trying to create a truth around entitlement. There's no entitlement. This is an insurance. This is a low-cost medical insurance and system to keep people propped up so they're not, not ending life earlier than they need to, or that they're just having some simple safety net. That's all it is, and it's not very much at all. Even that. So, anyways. So that's called me. I just started arguing for the square, by the way, where the circle is going to be the entitlement conversation, and the square is it's a safety net value piece. But really, what's the centerpiece is how do we keep the system viable, and how do we remember what we're really talking about? How to provide health and safety and respect for people that have come before us, and allow them to have a fuller life experience rather than dying earlier because they're destitute and they have no resources to get there and no ability to work their way to create value because they had their value early in the world. Do you see how all of a sudden talking about the cylinder really kind of like makes it a more of an adult conversation?
It does. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it has it honestly, if everybody would talk about the cylinder, it would be a much more productive conversation, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It becomes much more productive. Stay on the cylinder. Stop populating the environment with the projection. Some news shows focus on just the projection, and they're calling themselves a news show. Now, if they called themselves an opinion show or a stuff, then what would wind up happening is they wouldn't have the perception and um, the perception of them having more weight so they can tip the scale. This is why interviewers get into a little bit of trouble, because they got to be careful not that their opinion is not tipping the scale, that when they ask the person a question that the person is talking about the cylinder. But what has happened over the last 20 years, in a very saturated way, 30 years, 20 years, is that the the newscaster will ask a question and the person will not even answer the question. They'll just start talking about the illusion and not even answer the question. They start talking about the projection, ignoring the question, distracting.
Sure, a skilled, a skilled interviewee who's trying to seed a message or you know continue to, toe the party line, whatever their cause is, will pivot immediately from what the question that's actually being asked to them into what they want to talk about.
Yeah. That's correct. So then all of a sudden it's, I want to talk about the cylinder. So if you take the cylinder, and everybody was trying to say, well, the Mueller report's going to be the cylinder. The Mueller report's going to be the cylinder. And what happened is all the way up to that Mueller report, the projection was talked about. And media is very clear about this. It's proposed. We're not certain. Let's see how this is going to be. This could mean that. That's an illusionary talk. And what they're doing is they're saying, well, this could be true, or this could be true, or could be true. So when somebody gives a definitive sentence, and then somebody talks about their version of true as a possibility, what winds up happening is the person that's being definitive gets more credit, where the person that's being allowing perception to have a place doesn't get as much credibility. When just to do something specific, when Donald Trump or anybody tweets, they're putting a very specific, as I move my hand towards one projection, illumination of this is true. Then what happens is people take that and then do a thing called walk it back or amplify it. Walking it back is trying to minimalize the thing that's being said. Okay, because I'm walking it back.
Sure.
And then amplifying it is I'm trying to proportionalize what is actually taking place. Well, you can see no one's talking about the cylinder. What did the person say or do? Are we holding people accountable for what they say or do? The only place now we're holding people accountable for is under oath. And if you're under oath, the other side can still call you a liar, because when you were not under oath, you told a lie over there. Well, you get to lie when you're not under oath.
So they try and use you not being under oath to attack your credibility of when you are under oath.
Yes. Yes. It's like, no, that's not the cylinder. The cylinder is you're under oath. If we catch you not being in alignment about what was said or done, or what the person's motivation was, then what happens is that we get to use that against this. So the purchasing of truth has to do with really how much it gets us to number 3 in this list, the proportionality of it. The proportionality of it is I get to amplify proportionality in an untrue way in order to promote my illusion or my projection of a circle or my projection of a square. And I get to not talk about the cylinder. Are you feeling as upset as I am right now? Because I am sure upset and disturbed.
Yeah, it's disturbing, right?
Yeah.
It is really disturbing to have your truth bubble burst.
It is. Because you know what? If I start talking about ice cream, Tom, if I start talking about how delicious your favorite ice cream is, and you know what? Your favorite ice cream, you haven't been getting that for a while. And you know what? Those immigrants are taking your ice cream. All of a sudden, you get my vote because I'm enjoying the projection that you are providing me. You know what? They're not taking anybody's job. They are bringing less crime than's already here. Anyways,
yeah, I believe
that's
that.
that's the cylinder.
Yeah. That's my goodness. It
or
really,
more of the cylinder. The more of the cylinder is that bad people do some bad things, and you can proportionalize a bad person doing a bad thing. But if the person has enough truth, true projection, their true projection of what they're amplifying a person's into a belief structure is Tom Tom Hazard is taking Bill Sturley's pistachio ice cream away from him. And to make America great again, I've got to keep Tom Hazard from taking Bill Sturley's pistachio ice cream away from him. Now, can you see how weird this is getting as a conversation? Because I am putting the conflict between you and I'm making the conflict over ice cream. I am amplifying about how much Bill Sturley deserves pistachio ice cream rather than Tom Hazard taking his pistachio ice cream. In fact, because Tom Hazard is coming in and taking a pistachio, he's depressing wages because now all of a sudden I can hire Tom, and now Bill won't get paid as much and he can't have his pistachio ice cream.
there's so much to think about. And
wait, let me pick something else. Let me pick something else. Can you believe that person on food stamps had enough money for a refrigerator? This is what they spent on. It's like, oh my gosh. It's like they, in the modern age, we would like them to have a refrigerator in order to do the crap job that they've signed up to do, because they didn't spend the time in education or skill building or talent or wisdom, or just because this is where they like to play. They don't want the level of complexity that some other people would like. They don't want that. They don't want the beyond the rat race. They don't want to get on it. They're going like, hey, listen, kind of like my job. I like going out hunting and fishing. I like to do these kinds of things, and I don't need much more of an income. And I don't have to have that new Lexus or Audi or whatever that the media is throwing at me. Don't have to be on a yacht. I was on a yacht once, and that was enough. I don't have to own it.
wow.
Just stop. But the cylinder has to do with looking at simple sentence: all men are created equal. Is that sentence true? No, but it's a pretty damn good cylinder to look at.
Yeah.
Look at the cylinder. All men are created. They have inalienable rights. Really? Look at the cylinder. Now, what is the they have this thing in the cylinder, but complete freedom for gun use to everyone at the expense of others. I don't know if I like that true sentence for that person. The truth is, they're meeting their needs at the expense of another person, and they're kind of a little wacky, and they kind of aren't really working in a very solid day. I think the cylinder is protection and safety for people. Now, are you going to stop everyone? No. But but it's important to look at the cylinder.
Yeah. Well, the NRA is as good as anybody at illuminating their perspective, or the perspective they want people to see.
Yes, marketing, promotion, branding, identity building, identity, emphasize the need for choice. It's your right because it was what the founder intended for muskets, so that people could hunt whenever they wanted to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
That people get to defend themselves in their areas because we don't want a fully centralized government. Yeah. Regarding weapons, we don't really want that because then some people could take power over another person. Yeah. I'm kind of okay with some of those things because I'm looking at the cylinder. but I'm not looking at, the projection of what one person is advocating at the expense of others. Yeesh.
So, Bill, thinking back to the truth slide in our first episode ever, where you can get closer to the truth or get farther away from the truth, how do these perspectives and proportions and what am I missing? Perspective, perception, and proportion. I mean,
Yes.
isn't when you start pulling one of those levers more than the other or in a certain way, doesn't that get us further away from the actual truth?
It does. It does, because what you're doing is you're not focusing on the thing called the observable. The observable and the full range of the observable is to the best of a person's ability to observe. So if I'm looking and I'm keeping my eye observing this cylinder, and I can see the circle on one side, and I can see the circle projection, and I can see the square projection, but all of a sudden I'm bringing back to observation. Then I do some evaluation and saying, okay, if I put the word gun on the cylinder and guns for people, how can I get both of these worldviews to be written into law so that I have something to work on from the cylinder place? And I'm not overcompensating for one person's version of what's true and or another person's version of what's true. See, some people have such a version of truth that guns are dangerous, that they don't want to be anywhere near that gun because their worldview is this can end life or seriously damage me or my loved ones. So their true viewpoint is, I don't want anybody to have guns. But the other person's true version is, I've had guns for years. My family had guns. We have a need for safety. We've done the things that are necessary to provide our family safety. And from time to time, we go out both for recreational, for skill building and practice on this thing, or for hunting, because it's been a part of our family history to go out hunting. And I remember hunting with my dad and sitting up in a blind and shooting a deer, and how excited and energized he was at the skill that it took me to do that.
Very
Fascinating.
different perspective. Yes.
Yeah, but I can argue this. See, now with the first podcast, we were talking about observation as being the closest you can be. That's talking to the cylinder. Then evaluation, I'm going to look at the two perspectives. Then I'm going to make a judgment of those three things. I am not going to make a judgment that one of them is right and the other one is wrong. That's what's happening right now in our society. You see how unsettling this is, but also just it's an illumination piece. This is what that looks like.
Fantastic.
Okay, so then the next one after judgment is criticism. Well, that's a person polluting one of these true illusions, and then we got criticism and labels. That's going to project, and then we're just polluting one side of the perspective and calling that true and winning the war. Wait a minute. Winning the battle of the vote.
Right. That sounds
winning the battle of the vote. And the war is really getting back to, the real war is getting back to what the cylinder is. That's really really where the war is that's where we've got to do a better job of, and in the past we did pretty good But at the same time is, some people, didn't like it so much and they tilted the scale in the other direction.
Seems like it's a never-ending war to me, and maybe that's perpetual reality. Maybe it is always going to be a battle for um, getting to the cylinder, getting to what really is truth, because it's really so much easier, and maybe even human nature, to look at only partial truths and, for all these different things, beliefs, and, everything to be affected differently. But that's okay. I mean, I think this is why we're talking about this, right? To bring greater understanding to it all.
And there are so many wrongs in the world. What a proportional narrative makes, it says this wrong is not a big deal. And that's called reducing the impact of it. And then the other side has to then increase the impact. Now, if I want to also change the perspective, I can use the famous what about language. Well, what about this? And this thins out and reduces the value and the impact of the thing that was wrong. Well, what about this? So and so did this. It's just as bad as this. It's like, no, it's not, because they're just trying to thin out or reduce the value or the impact of a proportional narrative. Proportional narrative is just trying to occupy the space and time. So it's really challenging, So yeah, we're trying to get things to work a little bit better with our truth and our truth perspective.
Wow. Awesome. Well, I think that's another very important understanding and tool, really, in our toolbox, I think, of how to either, depending on your purpose, purchase truth or keep others from purchasing truth. So
that's right. Yeah. So the nice part about this is this gets us to the point where we can now have a good, solid podcast discussion, observable, about the cylinder, about how these three words are used to, and these three language structures are used to hijack the cylinder discussion. And they are guilt, blame, and shame. Those are the three. So I'm now going to use a language of guilt, a language of blame, and a language of shame in order to not talk about the cylinder. I'm going to talk about the proportionality of what truth is. So it gets us on this emotional gerbil wheel that then, regrettably, the messaging in America is designed to impact the listener only to confirm a belief and escalate their emotional experience, not really to talk about the truth in the cylinder of, hey, this thing isn't really working for us. Our infant death rate is way too high for the amount of medical stuff we know and have. Why is that? Let's try that one on, because that's a cylinder discussion.
Sure. Well, and I like the idea of, especially when truth is getting hijacked, and I think there are a few people that do that better than, honestly, than Donald Trump. And he is running for president again, and every week there's a new message. And I like the idea of us being able to then use these tools to identify what's happening and to be able to put it into perspective. I hope that's all right.
That's right. A greater perspective. That's right. A bigger perspective, broaden their perspective. That's right.
And then I'm hoping that some of the candidates will actually be listening to this podcast series and be able to learn a little bit about what they may be able to do to battle this, because few people seem to be able to. Certainly in 2016 election cycle, few people could take him off message. It was just label, diagnosis, and
they couldn't take him off message.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah, a truth, a plan, a resume, experience. We're not able to, in the past, we're not able to combat this very, very visceral dopamine response of how he would create anticipation and uncertainty and some of these other tactics that
Well,
we
and
talked about in the
promise
past.
everybody pistachio ice cream.
That's correct.
That's
That's
really
right.
what it was, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I know how to get pistachio ice cream because I can make it because I'm a billionaire and I've been there and I can make it. And this is the successes because look at where I am. And now I have the confidence to run for president. And all he's doing is, a bit of a language card trick, which is something you got to call the person on and say, wait a minute, I appreciate this point of view, but I'm not sure if that's the direction or the foundation that America wants to stand on moving forward. We're not going to stand on this foundation because, by the way, it's a very shaky foundation because you can get hijacked on multiple levels, and it's getting your needs at the expense of everybody else's needs. And I don't think we're kind of built on that. We're not really built that way. So it's we've got to decide how we want to deal with this. Anyway.
Wow. Awesome.
Good. More to come. Purchasing
right.
truth. We got to deal with the big three next: the guilt, the blame, and the shame, and get off the emotional gerbil wheel. That's what I'm thinking.
I love it. All right. I look forward to that one next time. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next time on another episode of Purchasing Truth.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.